I wanted to do anything to anybody. And then I did.
Hello, and welcome to another Hollywood Gothique video exploring horror, fantasy, and science fiction entertainment in Los Angeles. Today, we're communing with the spirits. Actually, we're interviewing Tanya Cyr and Justin Meyer, two people responsible for House of Spirits, our favorite Halloween haunt. What makes House of Spirits so great? It feels like being inside a haunted mansion. We're not talking about a 5-minute walk through a maze with monsters jumping out. This is a 2-hour, free-roaming, immersive experience that simulates a haunted cocktail party filled with live, or should we say undead, entertainment. Conceived by the creative team formerly responsible for the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride, House of Spirits offers multiple levels of entertainment. Guests spend the evening imbibing spirits, listening to musical performances, and chatting with actors who portray the ghostly inhabitants of the mansion. Also, there are walkthrough elements that lead to encounters with sinister spirits in darkened rooms. Though not a play, the cast interact with guests but do not enact a drama. There is a backstory shrouded in mystery, which visitors gradually uncover by questioning the inhabitants and by finding clues hidden on the premises. Visitors determine how much effort to expend solving the mystery versus sipping cocktails included with admission. Time, however, is of the essence. 2 hours is barely enough to sample every drink and explore the abandoned basements and cobwebbed attics. House of Spirits launched in 2019 with Casa Vega, about a painter whose art opened a doorway to other realms. After taking a year off during the pandemic, the event returned with Volkov Manor, which retained the basic template but introduced a new set of characters. For Halloween 2022, House of Spirits presents Vaughan Hall, this time based on a famous Irish haunted house. Meanwhile, the previous storylines are being staged in 5 other cities around the country, including New York and Seattle. Hollywood Gothique sat down with Tanya Cyr and Justin Meyer to learn more about what goes on behind the scenes of House of Spirits. Meyer oversees the event, and Cyr provides the elaborate creature designs. By the way, I am sipping Goya's Ghost, an excellent cocktail from the 2019 House of Spirits. I won't demonstrate the recipe, but sharp-eyed viewers will catch it among the photographs and video illustrating the interview. First off, we'll start with Justin. What lessons have you learned from previous years that you're applying to 2022?
We've been around since 2019, but even over all those years, every year we're learning more and more lessons on how to do the show. So there's plenty of lessons to be learned along the way. And for example, we do a lot of test marketing to see what sort of images are capturing people's attention in terms of our marketing. We will do a lot of experimenting with how many guests versus to each session that we're doing to see what the best ratio is so that the guests have an opportunity to have a more personal experience even amongst a crowd of people without losing the party vibe in the space. If it's too little number of people, it's not as much fun. If it's too many people, it starts to get crowded and also not a lot of fun. We play with our cocktail styles each season as well. We have a tendency to track everything at House of Spirits in terms of like, what are the cocktails that are exciting people? Which ones were the most popular? Do we have the right balance of cocktail experiences in terms of flavor profiles across the board? So not every drink tastes the same across the board. So there's a lot of experimenting that goes along with that. Even the flow inside of our attractions, we are dialing in on those every single season, trying to figure out what are the unique things we can do with the show that we don't also repeat ourselves too much, but we still make it feel like it's a brand new show each season. But we do like to stick to the things that work. So there is that fine line, that fine balance of finding the route each season. And every time we do it, in every market we do it, we learn more and more lessons. One big one I can tell you we always talk about is we no longer do late night sessions. Those are now no longer going to be a thing. We enjoyed those its first season. Very quickly we learned that after a certain witching hour, we should just stop doing the show.
So I assume that had something to do with the fact that cocktails were being served after a certain hour, that the crowd got rambunctious?
The thing with a certain hour to hit like the super late crowd, they're coming from someplace else. To make sure that the audience is safe, to make sure my actors are safe, to make sure that people are enjoying the experience the way we intend for you to enjoy the experience. We felt that was a session that we no longer needed to do. So we did add in matinee sessions instead. When we wanted to do those weekend 3-show days, we would add in an earlier session, which actually are very popular sessions. So it's another lesson to learn, that there's a crowd out there, this show across the board, that it's a wide range of audience that comes to the show for different reasons. The matinee sessions did go over very well. So it was actually rather surprising, because I wouldn't necessarily think people would be ready to go to a haunted cocktail soiree in the middle of the day, but they do.
You'll hurt your lover. You'll make them cry. You'll break a promise. You'll tell a lie. You'll never know the damage done until you see their loaded gun. This is the fate you have chosen. Now, go.
Obviously, there's some issues in terms of live sessions. If you're making a movie and you do something really intricately detailed, they might be extreme close-ups that really show it off. But you're doing something that people might be rushing by in the dark. And I'm wondering, you're learning about what registers, what do people perceive when they're, doing Velez Blue or whatever the maze happens to be, the stuff that's actually going to read to someone, who's had a few cocktails and is not sitting in a movie theater.
I think dealing with the customers who have had a few cocktails might be the hardest part, given this. But the first lesson I ever learned with creature design is silhouette and contrast, right? No matter what, you can always get somebody to look at something if it's big enough, if it's weird enough. And if there's enough popping out of the dark, that will burn into their image, right? They'll see that no matter what. So I do put in a lot of detail to my creature suits, even though I know that they won't always be seen. But we do hire professional photographers who come through and take pictures. So that's nice to have full pictures in the setting and all the details showing.
When I am done with you, you will feel the weight lift and you can re-enter society.
Are you a doctor?
Yes.
Oh,
Dr. Grigor Volkov.
Dr. Grigor. Oh, the Dr. Grigor. Obviously, House of Spirits, it has a template that works, and you can fill that template with a new story each year, new characters. But I'm wondering, how much room is there to fool around with the actual template? I mean, how can you expand? Can you add things besides just saying, well, we're going to do the same kind of thing, but with a different set of characters?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the goal, is to keep it fresh each season. In our grand scheme of the show, we're aiming to have a lot of connective tissue between the seasons. So some of the formula and some of the template is built in so that you recognize it almost in a sense, like a brand to some degree, right? That there's also these characters that will overlap in future seasons. And so those are the fun little Easter eggs that we build in, that the template allows us to really play with. But we do try to each season add in some kind of new attraction, if you will, to see what direction we can go with the kind of haunting that we want to do. So, for example, in some of the seasons upcoming, we're adding a thing called the seance experience, and so that seance experience is it's its own brand new designed program that's going to be built in as one of the attractions in House of Spirits, and we haven't done it yet. So it is a new experience altogether, and the actual action items in the seance are going to feel new to the guests. So for example, to go back to your question, the seance experience is going to be like a new attraction, just like we do our creature zone, or just like we do our dark maze experience. We will always have sort of these template things that exist, but we will try to make them different experiences each season. So when you come in, you don't know what to expect, and it's something brand new to get to experience from an audience's perspective if you've come multiple times. So there's room to grow in terms of the template, but we don't want to shatter it too much because we feel like that's a big component of what's missing in the haunt industry right now is this template that we have found. And this formula that seems to be working really well for us in this style of program. It's a way we like to tell stories. It's a way that we like to, we know we have discovered that the audience to go to a cocktail party, like there's elemental things that we just know as people. People will always love to have a cocktail in their hand. People will always love an environment that's constantly evolving and changing in terms of the vaudevillian style entertainment that gets rolled out for House of Spirits on our show floor. So that rotating content keeps the pace and keeps the energy alive. And so then when we lean into our formulas, we know those are the things we like to bring back each season.
Did you see an empty niche in the Halloween landscape that needed filling? Is that kind of where House of Spirits came from? And following up on that, do you now see other people trying to fill that niche? Yeah.
So for our sake, when we were attempting to design a Halloween program for our own company, we had come from 10 years of working at the Los Angeles Haunted Hayride and doing shows like the Great Horror Campout. And at that time, big haunts. I mean, we're also from Los Angeles, where we're right next to Universal Studios, Halloween Horror Nights, and all the other big theme parks and their Halloween attractions. And what we wanted to see kind of revitalize was this idea of like a boutique haunt experience where it was going to be more intimate. It was going to be more focused on the guest's experience directly with our characters. I have a theatrical background, a storytelling background. I was always very excited to tell stories and create fully thought out, fleshed out storylines and almost make them like theatrical pieces, but to push audiences through, but to have our own sort of take on this. So Delusion was doing it for many years, having the theater concept built into their haunt, where it was like you were walking through an immersive play. And we felt that we wanted our niche to feed the people that wanted to come to like a Halloween party. And then once they were at this Halloween party, we would then transform their experience into something more theatrical. And that was kind of the niche market that we were able to find our spot in. So opening up this open world concept, where you get to kind of walk around and explore things at your leisure. That kind of concept, it's been, you see it in some other haunts, in some other plays, even just shows in general. So that's not a new concept, but to apply it to this cocktail party event and then build out from that a storyline, and then to add into that our background of creature suit building for Tanya's sake, like having monsters in our show and not just ghosts, not just focus on like, some of the more tropes of Halloween and leaning back into a theatrical place. And we root a lot of our storylines in history, historical figures, and we love folklore, like traditional folklore from other cultures. So we try to implement those into the program each season as well, which is really, I think, what's finding our own sort of style and our own sort of voice in this industry.
Now, the creatures who want to play little games, you earn the tokens. I just suggest you play along, all right?
Oh, you have a token. You've got shows going in different cities, shows that debuted in LA now appearing elsewhere. So it's almost like LA's the Broadway of House of Spirits. It opens here and then the roadshow version goes elsewhere. And I'm wondering what kind of considerations, changes, adjustments have been made. Maybe starting with the creature design. I mean, having had the experience of doing the characters for Casa Vega and then Volkov Manor, any adjustments, anything that either in design-wise or making it more practical for application and for the actor to wear?
Absolutely. I think every year we like to make something better than we did the year before, and that does not fall short of any of the creatures or the costumes that we make. We joke around that LA is like our prototype city, and we love our actors that we've been working with for so long, and we build a lot of these creatures and characters for these wonderful actors that we've been working with all these years, because we know that they can just pull it off amazingly, right? A creature suit is fantastic, but it's nothing without the actor inside of it. And so going on the road, we have to take that into account, that we're going to be with new actors, we're going to be with people that we haven't worked with before. So building them more comfortable, easier to get out of, and just to look a little bit better, right? You've seen it in the lights, you've seen how it holds up throughout the month. All these things I take in as the show goes on. And so then the next year, I'm constantly improving and remaking things. Sometimes I shoot myself in the foot a little bit because I'll be like, this could be better. And then I load up my plate with stuff that, could have been okay. But I personally hold myself to a standard. So I like to, constantly make things better. I think I've learned so much over the years, just the few years we've been doing House of Spirits, as far as making creature suits so much more accessible to people who may have never been in a creature suit before, breathable, lighter weight. All these things constantly just improving and changing.
How much, if at all, does location, in both sense of the words, affect the show? Location in the sense, we're moving into this city, which may have a certain kind of population, and also location, the actual place where it's set. What brings this to mind is just the other day I was talking to some of the people from Paranormal Cirque, and they were talking about how they adjusted some of the comedy and stuff because what works in Ohio doesn't work in South Carolina, so to speak.
From the standpoint of content and space, we do our absolute best to try to find the best locations we can in our cities to put on the show. House of Spirits, it's obviously, it's got that name, House of Spirits. You want to find the right location for it in every market. Although some markets it's more difficult. For example, New York City, you don't get the old grand mansion haunted houses that exist out in some of these other places. So just adjusting to be in a turn of the century brownstone 5-story building changed the content inside of that based on needing to fill the space in a certain way. Same thing with last season when we were in Los Angeles. That venue in Los Angeles, the York Manor is where we were. That show, the layout of the house dictated a lot of how we were going to explore the content that year as well. And so some of these new cities, the buildings they're not as big of a house. So maybe we have to adjust the size of our dark maze. Maybe we replace the dark maze with a seance experience so that we give ourselves enough content that we can put in equally good content, but it fits the space better. That way we're not trying to do something that's going to be lackluster in that space. If you're trying to do a big, massive dark maze, but the basement is only this big, it's not going to play as well. So we do certainly adjust our content for that. And then, of course, Los Angeles, New York City, our show is geared towards adults. It's a 21 and over event. Our show has had nudity in it at times. So for our purposes, when we take it into these other cities, we also do take that into account. Like, what's the level of content that we're gonna do in these cities? Are we going to go all the way with some of that kind of content, or are we going to pull back just based on the audience, based on the house that we're in, based on just, a lot of different factors. So we will make certain adjustments in certain cities for that as well.
I guess you would have to adjust the creature from Bella's Blue. What's that? That's the one, right?
That's the one.
Yeah. So I'm sure there's a punchline for that somewhere. Like, what adjustment could you make to that? Well, I guess it's kind of obvious.
A few inches, huh?
Yeah, shave off a few inches. Yeah.
So when you see the Midnight Man, you must freeze in place. Do not move. Then you look at a candle and you say, "Take my light, not my life. Take my light, not my life." And if you are lucky, the Midnight Man will take your candle.
One of the things that always interests me about these events is there's a certain participatory element. Everybody's experience is going to be different depending on who they are and what they're looking for. So however much you plan this stuff out, I'm imagining you must have had some surprise reactions, either in person or comments people make afterwards. So I'm just looking at stuff that surprised you, like things that landed better than expected, or maybe other stuff that you expected to get a bigger reaction, but maybe people missed it either because they'd had too much to drink, or they were distracted by something else, or they were walking through a dark maze and they were so scared they had a head buried. What were the things that went differently from plan?
I don't know why it surprises me still to this day, but like the simpler, the better. And like sometimes I'll be like, this is too simple. This isn't going to be that fun. Like this idea is not going to really like play that well. Like last season in season 2, Volkov Manor, we did this thing with candles, and you'd go through the maze and your candles were being taken from you one by one. And for some reason I said to myself, that's too simple. Like how's that really going to play? And I got a great reaction out of it. Like people were screaming by the end of it. They were running out because they had no more candles. So now it's pitch black and they have to cross that last 10 feet in total darkness. And that was just enough to cap it. And I keep having to remind myself that if I keep things simple, that's where it really resonates with the guests. And it's usually when I overcomplicate it or to have more intelligent dialogue or whatever it is, I have more of a story, that's where things start to like, I start to lose people. They start to not quite understand what they're supposed to be understanding in that moment. I think we're working towards making our storyline, the overarching ghost story of that season. We're working on making it clearer for the audience every year. We've been trying to figure out, what do I say? How do I simplify this? Or how do I get the audience to understand the story a little bit better? And so this year we're working on an idea. I won't spoil it, but there's a way that people are going to really be able to fully like visually see and understand the backstory and the ghost story if they complete certain tasks. So that'll definitely help. But I think keeping it simple is the thing that I tend to shy away from, but I shouldn't. That's the thing that always surprises me.
Keeping it simple, people really respond to that. I think because it's recognizable, it touches something, inside everybody that, they can all see and know. But I know that there are several times I'll be making something like a headdress or a costume or a creature suit. And I'm like, wow, I'm putting so much work into this. This is going to be great. Everyone's going to notice. And, they don't, and that's fine. But then some of the ones that I find really simple or, relatively on the nose, for as much as our creatures can be on the nose, they get the most impact. And I think that also goes back to what actor is wearing what. There's a moment where you have to give up control and just trust that whoever you have wearing that thing is going to carry on your impact. And so sometimes I'll have an idea for a creature and I'm like, it's going to be like this and it's going to sound like this. And then the person in it is not that thing, but turns it into something completely different, which is equally as effective. But it's not the baby that I created. So that's an interesting thing for me at the end of the month, is to look at my creatures and sort of absolve in my head what they've become and take that to the next year and hope that the actor next year can probably do just as good of a job, but will also be different.
Regarding the creature design, I wanted to ask the chicken and the egg question. Is it always the story comes first, or do sometimes you come up with an idea and say, hey, Justin, can you incorporate this into what you're going to do next year?
I think season 1, House of Spirits, together we decided what the creatures should be, and then from there I designed them. Last year, he told me we're going to base these loosely on Slavic folklore, but this year was probably my most challenging design because usually I have a nugget to start with, right? This year in particular was super hard because I had no nugget, I had no egg to start with. So this year it is totally creature first. And then from there, I think we've added things to the stories. And that has happened in the past, I think, where I'll create a creature or a character and Justin will also take that and run with it and embellish, his storyline and give it to the actor.
We don't have any IP that we have to try to match. Mm-hmm. So we don't have to worry about making decisions and creative decisions that we change in the middle of our thought process. So we're very comfortable and that's part of the process that I really like the most, is when this idea leads to a better idea, and that's where the growth of these shows comes from. That's where the growth of the character design comes from.
I no longer wanted to get out of the water. I wanted to become the sea. Because what does the ocean do when something's in front of it? It crushes it, doesn't it, darling?
Swallows it.
I wanted to do that.
I know we've been talking a lot about process, which I love. I think it's really interesting, but people are probably going to know a little bit about what's new this year, what they're going to see. And I know you don't want to give away too many spoilers, but maybe you could give us a hint. On the one hand, what new creatures are we going to see? What, new characters are we going to see?
Our inspiration for this season is the Loftus House haunting in Ireland. So one of the most famous hauntings in Ireland. And so what we'll do every season, like I said, I enjoy doing like historical nuggets that we then build out from and create our own original content, original story with. So Loftus House was our jumping point, which the original tale sort of takes place in 1300s. So it's a very
1200s.
Yeah, it's a very challenging era.
Yeah, we have a lot of historically based costumes. Creatures are very rooted deeply in Irish folklore. But again, they are not anything that we've seen before. So we're not giving you banshees this year. They are original creatures.
We like to create our characters to be a little bit bigger, different, more avant-garde, a little more artistically designed. We don't worry so much about trying to give you like the traditional werewolves and the scary monsters. We were looking to try to expand the artistic vision of those characters, So it's a little more fashion forward sometimes.
It is, yeah. This year's a little more fantasy. I'd
Maybe
say.
a little more fantasy forward.
Yeah, especially the creatures are a little more fantastical.
Pay attention. We're going to play a game. What did I just say?
So what's the biggest challenge for this year? I guess technically for making a creature, or artistically from topping the first 2 years?
Yeah, creatures this year was, as I said earlier, much more challenging than previous years. Season 1, House of Spirits, we based them on emotions. So we had like anger and depression and physical illness and paranoia. And that was a blast to really dive into what those emotions would look like, especially like walking around and terrorizing you. For example, our paranoia creature is covered in worms and full of parasites. And, I think that embodies that emotion. This year, there was nothing to base them on. So I really had to dive deep into what sort of creature would you see from the 1200s, Ireland, very challenging this year. There's also a lot more freedom in it, which sometimes you can impale yourself on your own sword if you have too broad of a palette to work with, right? Because as artists, we want to do everything. So narrowing it down has taken some time. But as far as physically building them, it's kind of the easiest year.
And Justin, what are you trying to do this year to top years 1 and 2?
My goal is not necessarily to top ourselves and to outdo ourselves every season, but rather to make sure that if you're coming back to the show that you love. So you're still seeing those kinds of things built into the program, but it should feel completely fresh and new. From even the visual palette to our colored palettes, to our creature design, down to the cocktail tasting, to the characters that you're interacting with and how you're going to interact with them. Every year, the one-on-one experiences with the actual characters on the show floor, those even change. First season, we were doing spirit games where they would play an actual little game with you on the side. This last season, we did a lot of story focus. We did monologues. If you got to have a one-on-one with a character, they delivered these long monologues that were really cool. And meanwhile, you're interacting with an object while doing that monologue and still challenging the guests to do something fun. I think pushing our boundaries every year, we are looking for ways to not always push the boundaries in the same way. I think that there are ways that we can shock an audience or surprise an audience, and it doesn't necessarily have to come out of the same ways we do it every single season. So that's a challenge for me to figure out every year. And I feel like in this upcoming season, we definitely are going to have some moments like that built in as well, where I feel like we're going to be able to surprise you and shock you in the ways that you're used to, but we're going to look for that to come from a different place altogether, so that you don't really know where to expect it. That's the way we try to challenge ourselves every single season.
What's the craziest thing that's ever happened at House of Spirits that you weren't expecting? Did anybody freak out or just overreacted to something?
This is sort of a funny story. It's a little
sort of funny.
It's a little gross.
It's a little gross. You are dealing, I think, as Justin was about to say, with people who have been drinking. And so oftentimes their inhibitions are lowered. And we've seen some pretty wild things. Season 1, I think the most absurd thing we had ever seen. One of our areas is like a scavenger hunt, right? Trying to find certain things, and you bring it to a person to prove that you found them. That person was collecting them in a metal bucket, which he happened to have down on the floor at a certain point. And this girl, who had clearly been drinking heavily, came over and hiked her skirts up and used it as a toilet and just peed all over it right in front of a whole hallway full of people, and then just got up and walked away.
I don't see how we can top that one. We would like to thank Tanya Cyr and Justin Meyer for taking time to speak with us. This year, House of Spirits takes place at Casa Vega in Los Angeles on select dates in October. Tickets start at $69, and they are worth every penny. Take our word for it, you'll be glad you did. Until next time, may your glass be always filled with bewitching spirits.